Thanks for joining me. Today I'm talking to Emily Vandernagel, a PhD candidate at Swinburne University. Thank you very much for talking to us, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder if you can start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background and your research interests. What brought you here?
Okay, my PhD is about social media, pseudonymity and anonymity. So I started off with an honours project on Twitter. I was really interested in looking at the difference between what people said about Julia Gillard during the leadership spill on Twitter and in the news. And what I found out was that even though I thought the conversations would be really different, they were about completely the same kinds of topics, and it was just the opinions varied a little. And so that really got me thinking about how people, come to social media and have things to say about certain topics, and also, I guess, how they present themselves online. And that led me into thinking about identity and thinking about how people present themselves.
Right, fantastic. Yeah. So you're toward the end of your PhD thesis,
Yep.
which is looking at anonymity and pseudonymity. Pseudonymity. Sorry, that's going to be a great one to make it look silly in the videos. Don't worry, I won't edit that out. So in terms of what your main focus is, can you tell us a little bit about those two key concepts?
Okay, so I guess if you're on social media, one of the first things that you do is choose a name to use. And that seems like, a step that people might not give too much consideration to, but it's actually a key moment in I guess, establishing that dynamic between a person and a platform. So when someone comes to a social media site and they're signing up for it, when they choose their name, they might choose their own name or a variation of their own name. They might choose a nickname, or they might choose something that has nothing to do with their name at all. And it's those kinds of choices that I think is really important to whether they're anonymous or pseudonymous. I guess the main difference between the two is that pseudonymous means you're using a name that isn't your real name, and anonymous means you're using no name at all. There's actually Cole Strike has written a book about hacking and being anonymous online, and he says that really the only true anonymity is if someone went out, bought a laptop in cash, went to an internet cafe, signed into their public Wi-Fi, and then logged into every single social media site with a brand new name, and it was, for example, just a string of numbers. That's being anonymous on the internet. So I guess although people use anonymity a lot to mean people who don't use their real name, what they're talking about most of the time, I think, is really pseudonymity, using that different name rather than being completely unidentifiable.
And even those people who use pseudonyms are sometimes doing it strategically to actually be identifiable and
That's
to
right.
be locatable anyway, because, I'm not going to call all of my Twitter accounts Adam Brown. I've got, my dog's name, or Taller Ewok is my gaming name. So there's an element of you can be quite strategic with them. But I'm working with a lot of students, and quite often most people do use their real name as such. So what's interesting about that is, what do you think are the pros and cons of these pseudonyms? Why are they valuable?
Pseudonyms are mostly valuable because of contextualization. People want to talk to specific audiences at specific times. And I think that's something really important to the idea of being online in general. When you're offline, you limit your conversations to who's there at the time and who can hear you. And then after the moment has passed, because there isn't a record of that, it's much easier, to say gossip to your friends or be professional at work than it is when, in comparison to being online. If you're trying to type things and have those same sorts of conversations, it's harder to compartmentalize them into just talking to certain people at certain times. Because if you say something online, it exists long after you've said it, long after the moment of communicating. And I think that the most important way that people use pseudonyms is to put that communication into specific contexts. If you're going to use a gamer handle, you might be like talking about really specific games. You might be like swearing at people and like having a blast, and that might be really contextually appropriate. But if someone Googles Adam Brown, you might not want them to know what you were saying in your last Counter-Strike game, for example.
I just play alone. I don't have any friends. I actually had one student tweet out a picture of a dog playing Monopoly, as
Aw.
if, that's what people with no friends do. So that's fair enough. But no, I mean, it is really interesting. And what's a fascinating thing you said before is whether people choose to have to use their real name, to use their actual name, or to use a pseudonym. That's been a huge debate online in recent years about and you can talk to us about this, about the kind of the so-called real name internet and who's been promoting that, and who are the proponents of that, and who are also the opponents of that.
So that's been a real issue, especially since Google Plus launched in 2011, and they decided that if people wanted to use their social media site, they had to use their real names to be part of it. That made a lot of people really unhappy, because not only did it really limit the amount of people who could come to Google Plus and use it in the ways they wanted to, but it also sent out a clear message that pseudonyms were they were not a real identity, and they weren't genuine or authentic in a lot of ways. And I think that actually when people go online and use pseudonyms, in a lot of cases, what they're trying to do is get at something very genuine and authentic about themselves. It's just a matter of not wanting everything that you say online being completely accessible to anyone who can Google your name. So when Google Plus launched and said, this is the rule, a lot of people were really unhappy with that. And it turned into, like a big battle between, I guess, the consumers or people who wanted to use that site and the actual platform staying fast about their rule. And it turned into what was called the pseudonym wars, or the NIM wars. So ever since then, I guess social media sites that have continued to insist on real names, Facebook, for example, still has a real name policy, even though not everyone sticks by it. Those kinds of platforms, like, they're sending a message about what's appropriate to do online and what's not. And it's pretty obvious to see why a platform would want everybody to use their real names, because it helps them with data collection. They can build up a profile about someone, and they can sell that information onto advertisers, and that's how they make their money.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool that you can research something that's called the NIM Wars. And you can actually have that to frame conference papers and things. No, that's great. I noticed in one of your publications you wrote that practice plays a key role in entrenching particular social and behavioural norms on social media platforms. Now, it's hard for me to spring a quote on you like that and ask you to contextualise and explain it, but that's a really interesting idea of practice being the absolute crucial component on how behaviour is actually mapped, because that does relate to this. We can say, well, platforms are not going to be necessarily used the way they're designed or intended for. So what can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. When we're talking about practice in terms of what people do on social media, the argument in that particular paper was you can make rules as a social media platform, but what really matters and what other people, how other people model their behaviour on this particular site, it always depends on how other people use the site and not actually the rules. So, for example, Facebook can say, we want you to use, your common identities or your real names, but you can get on Facebook any day of the week and see people who don't have their first name in the first name box and their last name in the last name box. And that goes for a whole lot of things that we do online. For example, when Twitter began, they only have conventions like the hashtag or the @ symbol or threaded tweets, because they paid attention to how people were using that platform. People wanted to, for example, connect their tweets with a particular topic that they were talking about and have a kind of larger conversation around particular topics, whether that's, a current event or a TV show. And so they started to use like the hash symbol and then whatever they were talking about. And now you can click on that hashtag and then see that broader conversation. So, that's a good example of a platform who's paying attention to how people use the site and who are giving them more tools. For example, instead of copy pasting someone's tweet and using the little abbreviation RT for retweet before it, now there's a button that you can just retweet straight away on. So platforms that listen to their users and who appreciate that they're going to do certain things with their site and help them do it, they're the most successful. I think, for example, with Facebook, they've said, we want people to use their real names. And instead of everybody obeying the rule, there are a lot of people who say, nope, they have a pseudonym, or they'll have their middle name instead of their surname. People will get around it if it's not what they want to do.
I'm a living testament to how problematic using real names can be on Facebook, because when I was early on in the days that I joined Facebook, I was invited to the group of people, the Facebook group of people called Adam Brown.
There's a whole group?
They created a group of it, not for people who knew each other and were going to talk, but just if your name was Adam Brown, you can be part of the group.
So how many were there?
There was a lot. I joined initially, but that was an old account. So,
there you go.
There are, I'm going to throw another quote, you've written about the costs of a totalizing embrace of the real name internet, and
That's
what
right.
you're talking about there, it's absolutely, it does inhibit flexibility and creative expression, because we've got, as you mentioned, gamers and gamer tags, that kind of thing. People do take control of their own identities and express themselves in different ways and experiment with different forms of, and play, I suppose, with their identities, when you do have that kind of flexibility to use pseudonyms and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's most important, I guess, again, for context. What people do online is they, when they're using particular social media sites, and most people use more than one. I mean, for sure, there's a large group of people who are just on Facebook, but even they would probably, maybe instinctively understand that you put different things on Facebook than you would in a private email to someone. So when you're talking about the sort of communication that people do over several different social media sites, what you can see them doing is just trying to talk to one group of people at a time. And I think, a large part of what gets misunderstood about anonymity and pseudonymity online is that people have this assumption that when someone's anonymous, they're up to no good. And I don't think that that's the case at all. Actually, what someone's trying to do when they're anonymous is, or pseudonymous, for example, is try to get at something that can be quite true about themselves, or quite sincere. But all they want to do is make sure that they're talking to just the people who are, say, interested in that topic, and not every single person that they know. So I guess what I meant when I'm talking about the dangers of having a real name web, or for example, what might happen if every single social media said you can only use your real name, is that we would lose a lot of people who just can't afford to be connecting every single piece of information about themselves on the internet. And that's for a variety of reasons. Some people have, political ideas that don't line up with, with the way they are at work. Some people have gender or sexual identities that they don't want every single person to know about. Some people are fleeing abusive relationships, or they don't want other people to be able to find them. There are so many reasons why someone might not want everything about them on the internet connected up together.
I hadn't even thought that this might come up. It hadn't even occurred to me. But the collective anonymous online, it
Capital
really does.
A anonymous.
I mean, perspectives will vary about anonymous, but I mean they've done some incredibly creative and productive things, we could say, in relation to their social justice kinds of activities around the world. So that's kind of another really interesting facet of anonymity, where probably it has become, I suppose, a dirty word in some circles. But,
yeah, absolutely.
And the kind of dark anonymous sort of persona can maybe sort of could be seen to feed into that. But when you look underneath that surface, you've got some really amazing things happening.
Yeah, I think a very good case study for both the creative side and, I guess, the more mischievous side of online anonymity is 4chan. 4chan's a bulletin board where people can post about things in certain topic threads. And so the most notorious part of 4chan is the miscellaneous, or the B board. People come on that site and they post, everybody who posts on 4chan posts under the generic username of Anonymous. And the person who started 4chan, Chris Poole, he's got a really interesting set of ideas about online identity, and he calls people's identities online prismatic, because he thinks that people have different facets of themselves which they want to show and hide at various stages in their life. And I think that even if someone's not very familiar with being on social media, that idea sounds very familiar. You know, I mean, like for example, there's a sociologist, Irving Goffman, and he talks about the presentation of the self in a dramaturgical way. And what he means by that is that when someone's interacting with somebody, there's always a context for that is a little bit like having a set and a stage. So he thinks that, and again, you're a different person when you're hanging out with your friends, when you're at work in front of your boss, when you're playing with a young child, a niece or a cousin, or if you're like out and about just on the street, you're going to be a different person, not because you're duplicitous or because you're up to no good, but just because you know that in different circumstances you show different facets of yourself.
Exactly right. And performativity is a huge element of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
In around the time we'll be looking at this video for identity. I mean, the drawing on Butler's ideas, Judith Butler's ideas of
absolutely.
performativity. It's nothing new in as you say, in a lot of ways it's nothing new.
No, Irving Goffman was talking in the 1970s, for example, and that was long before the internet was a domestic technology, at least, and it was certainly long before social media was very popular. But I think those ideas can carry it through because people understand that you want to be true to yourself, but you also want to be appropriate to a context that you're in.
Yeah, there's really fascinating work about authenticity being conceptualized as stage management rather than it being sort of truth or the essence of someone. It's actually a strategic representation or performance of the self or selves.
Yeah.
And exactly. That's fantastic. The last thing I wanted to ask you about relates to your own identity, I suppose, in a sense. We don't need to deconstruct how you see yourself and portrayed online in all different ways. But what I like to really emphasize to students in all of my teaching is the need to be active and engaged online.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that I found someone like you working in your area is the very fact that you're engaged online, and we met through Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and you're also on academia, which is kind of the academic version of LinkedIn, I suppose. In terms of your activity, how have you found being active and engaged online useful in terms of perhaps a motivational tool, but also, putting your thoughts out there and engaging with communities? How has it been useful for you?
I think Twitter in particular has been really important for being an academic. It's not only where I meet other academics through, for example, hashtags that we might be interested in, or through following the people who follow someone I already know, but it's a really great way to spark conversations and to keep in touch with other academics after you meet them. And I think if I go to a conference and I start tweeting under the conference hashtag, it not only is it this incredible and really fascinating back channel about everybody reflecting on the speaker as they're talking, but also it can lead you into discovering people who are interested in the things that you're interested in. That, for example, is also what Reddit's really good at. It's organised into subreddits, and you can find the things that you're interested in and kind of tailor the site to whatever grabs your fancy. So I think for me, having a Twitter account that I guess I check so many times throughout the day, and I guess always having that back and forth between people who are online and people who are interested in the things that I am has been really, really important in terms of connecting up with with ideas online, with new research, with new people, and it gives me somewhere to always check into. I guess I feel like I'm never really off Twitter. I get up in the morning and I check Twitter. Whenever I pick up my phone. And because I guess there's that ambient intimacy of always having it on and always having this group of people that I know will be there and will be talking, it gives me something to always come back to. And I really like the way that keeps you connected with a whole lot of different people in your life.
A lot of the skepticism about being active and engaged online is just how much time it takes. But if we think about some of the other platforms like Facebook, a lot of people behave the same way with Facebook, but don't think about that as being online all the time because it's so naturalized.
Yeah.
We're always on in some regards, and Twitter in terms of the media cultural industries and expanding out from academia, the kinds of things that you've found are pretty much relevant to anyone who wants to work with media. You want to stay connected, you want to stay up to date, and you're never going to get to know everything, but these kind of platforms at least allow us to be tuned in and engaged in a network and an ever-expanding network of people and ideas.
Yeah, that's been the best thing about it for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Great,
and
you're welcome.
thanks for watching.